Good morning, and thank you for having me from across the river. If you are depressed by looking at the need for a new economy, I've been depressed all my career by looking at corporate and state misconduct. So meetings like this used to be therapeutic for me, sharing the frustrations. And I would like to build on some of the things that I've done in the past and things that I'm doing now to move toward a kind of normative framework within which things we heard about in the morning, such as democratizing capital and rebalancing institutional power, can be done a little more easily without the risk of torture and hanging that we heard about. There are three things that I would suggest that we need to pay attention to. Firstly, the negative externalities of legal businesses that need to be re-internalized. Secondly, the centrality of integrity and accountability. And thirdly, something that is a little bit politically incorrect, realigning the legitimate and the legal, particularly as projects of governance development and anti-corruption are implemented in developing countries. Let's take them one at a time. There was a time when it was sort of consensus thinking that what is good for business is good for America. What is good for GE, we started thinking, was good for America. What was good for good businesses, it was good for capitalism. Well, Neva Goodwin and I worked a few years ago, and for some years, to effectively question that assumption. And we published a book with the title, "It's Legal, but It Ain't Right." The central argument in that book was that the prices aren't right. What the profits aren't right. They're inflated, and costs are being externalized in a way that are damaging to society and the economy. And they are unsustainable, and there are multiple costs that are essentially getting lost in the market. There are no market signals to indicate that something needs to change. And we got our public priorities wrongly because the effects of these policies are in many instances worse than organized crime. Some examples: we need essentially to recognize and understand those externalities and try to re-internalize that cost. But there are physical costs, there are financial costs. We heard about some of those in the morning. Undermining of democracy, when a financial institution goes to another country and says, you got to get rid of this opposition, you got to get rid of this autonomy movement because there is uncertainty. Democracy is actually not a very good idea here. We need certainty for investment, otherwise we will not come here, or we will pack up and go. There are opportunity costs. There are problems with undermining economic growth. Just take a look at the savings and loan disaster that we had here, or the problems with odious debt in Africa and elsewhere. And by odious debt, the references to debt that is created without the consensus of the people, against the interests of the people, and with the knowledge, or they should have known, of those who did the lending that this was the case. What we have is we've ended up in a situation where public health, education, and other priorities in Africa are being neglected. They cannot be paid for because Africans are paying for the weapons, essentially, that kill their loved ones. This is the kind of capitalism that wears no clothes, and we should expose this nakedness, and we try to come up with some proper attire. And this is not just in Africa, by the way. Just look at what's going on in my native country, Greece. I'm particularly frustrated because I was invited to join the government last year, and unfortunately I was not able to accept it, and I can tell you why during the time that we spent here. But it is a similar situation where unsustainable and ill-thought policies are being imposed that kill growth and create more debt rather than less. So these are similarly, you can talk about international trade and what subsidies and protectionism are doing, so selective application of free market kind of principles that are, again, providing what Stiglitz remarked is a perverse encouragement for bad accounting, myopic behavior, and exercise in excessive risk-taking. So here we're talking about practices mostly that are lawful but awful, and we need to actually do something about them. And by the way, apply those also to international organizations and states. What Niva and I did was limited to some industries, and we didn't do that. We were unable to find someone to contribute to the financial industry, but this equally applies to what's being done at the states and international organization level. But beyond that, here we come to the second point, integrity and accountability. Some of that behavior, some of the causes of the financial crisis and other problems is the result of downright unethical and illegal or criminal behavior. The FBI told us that there was a wave of an epidemic of mortgage fraud. Not very much is being done by way of prosecuting and doing something about that. We have seen Madoff's shenanigans, but very little about Countrywide and other financial institutions. The OECD Secretary General told us about the moral, ethical lapses that created the financial crisis that brought the economy, the global economy, to its knees. So unethical and criminal behavior lie at the heart of the problems that we're talking about, and we need to take action. We should not. Accountability is important because we are acting like the author of Black Swan was on CNBC saying that it is like taking Novocaine for a root canal. The problem is that even if you take Novocaine, you still hurt when you go through a root canal. A more appropriate metaphor, I think, is that we're giving drugs to the patient so he forgets about the pain. At some point he will wake up. I mean, we have a financial system that is on drugs right now, and when the drugs are removed, the unsustainability of what goes on is again going to be exposed. So accountability is important, and we do have the means. The basis are the UN Convention Against Corruption, the OECD Principles for Good Business, the World Economic Forum, the International Chamber of Commerce. There are all kinds of principles that we can build on from there and do away with those legal asymmetries where companies could, and still do, compartmentalize in such a way their misconduct so that they commit crimes without committing law violations because they do everything where something is allowed. And we need to do something about that. Due diligence, by the way, is a concept that was introduced to analysis by the private sector in Wolfsburg meetings about credit risk and good banking. This is at the heart of what we need to do in proper governance. It is not something foreign or a stranger to business. And finally, something that relates to a critical view of what the anti-corruption development and governance agenda, where serious money is being thrown at, is not done well. And that is why it is a bit of a difficult topic to discuss with those who apply. It's a misapplication of anti-corruption and governance. What we have is partly a cottage industry of consultants who provide the technical assistance and implementation, partly ethnocentric exportation and forcing countries into models that have nothing to do with local traditions and practices. And that creates a totally unsustainable model for integrity and accountability. One example is where we're forcing the formalization of the informal sector as if it's a panacea all of a sudden that a formalized economy is more efficient and fair. Nothing further from the truth in some instances where I have looked, for example, in the informal remittance methods of Hawala and similar networks that we have in South Asia, Middle East, Africa, and throughout the world, because they're different kind of networks. They have different names, but the mechanics are the same, where you can see that the consumer protection is the top priority. There is no credit risk, there is no default, and when there is some problem, they take care of it. And I can expand on that if you wish during the workshops on other things. But then you have international institutions going in and saying, informal, bad, formal, good. And that is being forced down their throat, totally uncritically. But in many instances also you have an ignorance of local, long traditions of what is the proper thing to do. Sometimes the gift giving, the support of the family is the decent thing to do. And by introducing new laws, doing the decent thing and the legal thing come into conflict. We should not be forcing people into this dilemma of, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the legal thing? Because there is no alignment of what is legal and what is legitimate. So in a sense here, the third point is the reverse of the first one. We have legal practices that are harmful, and here we have illegal practices that are useful, and I submit to you the Havala business model is much better than those that are coming from Western banking and so on. So, in short, as the private-public relationship and the need for regulation and the extent of regulation are being revisited, sometimes de facto, sometimes through debates, awareness raising and consciousness about these things is of paramount importance. And in conclusion, the three things that we need to do essentially are these. No more perverse incentives to do the wrong thing. We haven't done much about the financial sector here either. It is a global problem and not in the developing world or here. Secondly, define clearly what is right and what is wrong. And thirdly, consistently apply the clear and fair rules so that we do not have the situation that we have right now. Thank you so much.